Hotel Transylvania Transformania.
Boy, that was fun!
The only place to experience Transformania is in a movie theater, October 1st.
This is it! The franchise's final film. The last installment of the Hotel Transylvania franchise. After nearly 10 years, it was quite a wild ride with the Drac Pack, and honestly, that ride sucked!
I don't believe it.
Yeah, it's no secret that I was never a fan of these movies since the beginning. I'll give them that they do have a great concept going for them with a hotel for Halloween-type monsters where they can have their own vacation, and they are, of course, far from the worst movies I've ever seen. But if I could sum them up in one sentence, they're like Happy Madison Jr. films where Adam Sandler and his friends do the same thing as they do in their live-action films like Grown Ups or I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry. But in order to be more kid-friendly, they mix in elements from the Alvin and the Chipmunks movies by supplying a lot of bouncy animation and moments that desperately try to be cool and trendy for the children, but end up making them feel dated and more cringy with age. If it weren't for the animation, I would have thought that these were directed by Raja Gosnell. I mean, a lot of what Drac does feel like they would have been commonplace in a Gosnell movie. But instead, the directing duties of these features actually belong to television animation veteran Genndy Tartakovsky. Before anything, I'd like to state that I am actually a fan of Tartakovsky's works. Always have been, in fact. I grew up with Dexter's Lab, Samurai Jack has always been awesome, his Clone Wars series is the best thing from the Star Wars prequel era, and I think Primal is not only his best work, but also one of the best adult animated series in recent years. For television, this guy is a master. For movies, on the other hand, they are the lowest points of his career. It's true that executive meddling is also at fault in this case, but it's impossible to look at the franchise's faults without acknowledging the director's creative input. And as I watch them, they can be so bad that I often wonder that maybe there is a reason why, despite working at the studio for more than 10 years, Sony wouldn't let him do any other project so far except for Hotel Transylvania. But that's just my thoughts on the franchise as a whole. When it comes to the movies individually, it's a case where each one is worse than the last. The first one sets the standard of its low bar. Once Johnny enters the scene, that's when the typical Chipmunk-style tone spoils the moment to become bland and unpleasantly weak. However, I do agree that this is technically the best of the bunch. It does introduce the hotel concept pretty well, and does contain the franchise's funniest moments.
Oh, lots of sheep!
I got this one.
The second one is the textbook example of a pointless sequel. There was little creative motivation to make something good here, and delivers a strong feeling that this was only corporately demanded in order to turn the first into a franchise. As for the third, it is so bad and so unfunny with its failed attempt of ripping off the Looney Tunes that I could almost say that it's one of Sony Animation's worst movies. Not as bad as either the Emoji Movie or Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 2, but it was quite close. Which finally brings us to here with number 4. As you can tell, this won't be just a review of Transformania. This will simultaneously function as a retrospective to all the movies, highlighting all my thoughts on what's good about them, what's bad, and why Sony Animation is creatively better off without them. So, with all that said, how is the finale of Hotel Transylvania? Let's find out. The story. The funny thing about the Hotel Transylvania movies when it comes to their stories is, well, they never had any. Instead of being what they are as feature films, they rather view themselves as cartoons to the likes of the Looney Tunes. That's why, instead of an actual story, they have what can be better described as established scenarios, where the priority of the plot is secondary compared to the comedy. The first is about what if a human enters into a hotel for monsters and a vampire falls in love with said human. The second is about training Dracula's grandson to be a true vampire where there could be a chance that he may not be. The third is about the monsters taking their own vacation on a cruise and the vampire falls in love with a human. Again. And finally, with the fourth one, it's all about what if the characters switched roles, where Johnny becomes the monster and Drac and his pals become human. However, this structure does come with a price. Since story doesn't matter as much here than in other films, they usually come out as relatively weak. The kind that's been overused to the point where they generally are present in series whenever they need a throwaway episode to meet its quota for the season. They're unengaging, they're easy to forecast the outcome right from the beginning, and the morals are the same repetitive ones that children's cartoons continuously tell, and the way they deliver them are generally clumsy in a way that keeps feeling like it talks down to its audience. It's obvious how this aspect of the writing was never important to the franchise, and they feel like they had the enthusiasm of something that they just wanted to get over with quickly so that they could get to the parts that they actually want to do. In the case of Transformania, right from the moment they set up the conflict of Drac and Johnny, and how Johnny becomes a monster for his father-in-law's approval, I could immediately guess that in order to turn back what they were before, they would have to bond.
I can't do it! I thought I could give the hotel to Mavis and Johnny, but he's going to ruin everything!
But, as I said before, the movie doesn't generally care about telling some compelling story. It knows that's not what people watch them for. Since comedy takes the most importance here, what matters the most is to be funny. I get it, if you can get some good laughs from your viewer, it will help a lot with looking past the setbacks. In fact, I can actually forgive all of the problems with the story if it can make me consistently laugh the whole way through, and have a good supply of jokes that could help me look back at this more positively. But here's the big problem with these movies. The comedy started off on a low bar and then gets less and less funny after every sequel. Of course, I would lie if I said that I never laughed at a single moment in these films, especially when the first had some good ones during the scenes when Johnny is not there. Even in Transformania, there are a few gags that did get a chuckle out of me.
The nightmare! It's over! I'm human again!
However, that's unfortunately the best that the comedy could do, only supplying rare chuckle-worthy moments, while the rest is just the same tiring slapstick humor and making every scene as exaggerating as possible that can get old quite quickly. While not flat-out horrible, it's absolutely not worth sitting through 80 to 90 minutes of mediocre at best jokes. And this ultimately brings up how these stories, especially Transformania, are just awful. It's ironic how Drac in this has to learn about accepting Johnny for who he is, which, by the way, is an element that is completely copied from the first film, so that's just a side note on the issue of the writing's laziness, when the films themselves can never accept that they are movies and not cartoons. As much as they want to be the latter, they end up dragging plot lines meant for 7-minute shorts to over an hour, and can really kill the pacing to feel much longer than they actually are, where, despite all the chaos, there's very little that's actually happening story-wise. Not to mention continuously cutting to side plots that contribute little to nothing to the story, and mainly serve as filler. Which is the case with Drac's friends here also turning human, and Mavis and Erica try to figure out where the main boys are.
I leave you alone for 5 minutes and you become a human?
Babe, chill.
Cut it up. Lobby's not dessert, okay?
Mavis, what is going on?
This is why I have to judge these movies so harshly with their stories, because they're not cartoons. They are movies, which is a storytelling medium. If it wants to be a comedy and give out some laughs, that's perfectly fine. But if it's not capable of doing that and never bothered to put in effort to tell a meaningful story, then the movie is just left with no purpose. The animation. If there's one element that people remember the Hotel Transylvania franchise the most, even more than the cast of monsters and its use of Adam Sandler's friends, it's the stylized animation. How it embraces its Saturday morning cartoon nature and go crazy to open up new possibilities with computer animation to somewhat distance itself from realism in order to be wilder as a tactic to capture audiences' attention. It is also what takes the most advantage of its concept of a hotel for supernatural creatures, filled with numerous of unique designs of classic monsters that are easily capable of standing out from one another, and the gothic look of the hotel itself, where they both let out a very distinct Halloween feel that leans more in the fun than the scary.
Celebrating 125 years!
Way to go, Dragon!
Yes, sir.
Again, it's a great idea for an animated feature, and there are some parts that the team at Sony did make the most of. But then there is its style. The manic, over-the-top attitude that is the driving force of Transylvania. I understand that this is something that's very unique to the franchise, and it is far different than what virtually every other CG movie has done. It does have its fan base, but to be very honest, I am not a fan of this. This, to me, is a great example of style over substance. It's the same reason why I never enjoy the Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs films and how they suffer from the same issues of style over substance and weak writing. Believe it or not, it is not the style itself that bothers me. I actually don't really have a problem with it. What I do find bad about it is the purpose of the style. How so much of the movie, like the comedy and the characters' personalities, are so dependent on the visuals alone, and not give a chance for the script to give any of these movies a meaningful soul. It's as if they're aware that they never had writing that is good enough to carry a whole picture. So instead of trying to put in the effort and develop a script that can do justice to its strong concept, they have this John K mentality where they solve all their problems by having their characters be as over-exaggerated as possible with both their movements and expressions. And one massive problem with Transylvania's use of this is how it's like they keep repeating the same joke where they want to emulate the same kind of Looney Tunes slapstick humor, but never understood what actually makes them funny. As a result, because it tries so hard to push its style to the extreme and keep failing to deliver effective comedy, they end up making the experience feel more tiring and make the time feel longer than it actually is. It's the kind of style that Brad Bird was talking about regarding what to avoid for the Iron Giant.
We want tons of good ideas, and we got, 80 minutes here to knock everybody out. And, I don't mean like doing tons of and cutting every 2 seconds and sort of yammering. Oh, here's the song number. Okay, here's an action sequence. It's not that.
In the case of Transformania, it serves as proof that just because it's animation, that doesn't excuse it for establishing this kind of tone. It doesn't experiment new ways to play with its style, the backgrounds are stale with the same hotel as usual, a jungle, and a cave with crystals, and even the designs of the new version of these characters can feel off-putting.
Wow! What's up, fellas?
Ooh. Oh, he got the worst of it.
Granted, I will give credit that there are a few good and creative spots like Van Helsing's mechanical body as he goes through around his lab, but his appearances are far and few between, and like the other films, it takes advantage of its eccentric nature to deliver an exciting climax. However, also like before, they appear so late in the film that after going through more than an hour of exhausting and unpleasant wackiness, you're at the point that you feel fed up about everything in the film and just want this to wrap up. Now, at this point, I just want to state that this is not the fault of anyone. The animators are just doing what they're told to make, and it's not even the new director's fault for this to come out so weak. It's just that Hotel Transylvania is built on a hopeless foundation from the very beginning, and there's just no way anyone could salvage what little entertainment value it has left, especially by movie number 4. It's good to have a style for the animation, but when you use the style as the substance, that's a bad sign that there is no appeal to the movie. And when the actual substance of the movie has no appeal, then the animation also has no appeal whatsoever. The characters. I find the characters of Hotel Transylvania to be interesting. They simultaneously offer both the best and the worst elements of the franchise, whether it be their personalities, their voice acting, or their comical moments. In Transformania, they are the most noticeable indicator that Transylvania is getting overused and don't have any new material to offer. What is new and surprising, however, is how a couple of key players did not return for the fourth film, specifically Adam Sandler and Kevin James. In the case of Sandler, I honestly find this to be a bittersweet change. This may sound crazy, but Adam Sandler is possibly the best aspect of Hotel Transylvania. His voice as Dracula is actually fantastic in the first 3 films, not just capable of making the dialogue enjoyable with his delivery, but also present the emotional side of Drac and how much he cares about Mavis and his hotel guests. As of this review, there is no confirmed reason as to why he or James left, although judging by the script, I don't blame them. But there is a silver lining to his absence. In his place, Sony hired Brian Hull, who already had experience voicing Drac, and while he may not be 100% accurate, he actually does a great job impersonating him. Like the kind that if you were never told that this wasn't Sandler, you wouldn't have even noticed.
I have started a new phase in my life, and I feel it is time to begin a new chapter for Hotel Transylvania.
Also, even if it's for something like Hotel Transylvania, I have nothing but admiration for Brian Hull with how this YouTube impersonator is living the dream by starring in a mainstream animated feature from a billion-dollar franchise. I'll even give credit to Brad Abrell for his impression of Kevin James. His role may not be as big, but he also did very well in taking on the role. But back on to Dracula, regardless of having great talent, his purpose in the feature is weak. Not only does he repeat his role of trying to grow a bond with Johnny, but he's just the butt of most of the movie's jokes where he's constantly having a hard time trying to be a human. And speaking of which...
Johnny works so hard to make this extra special. He has everything under control.
Oh no.
Yes, Johnny is the other main character of the fourth feature, where he wants to have Drac's trust and approval so that he and Mavis can take over the hotel after the old vampire retires. I just need to get this out of the way. Not only do I think he's the worst character of the franchise, but he's one of the worst cartoon characters ever created. He's the kind of character whom being loud and highly obnoxious is his only personality trait, and every scene with him in all 4 films are the cringiest and worst moments that make the experience quite hard to sit through. In fact, Drac perfectly described him best when talking to Erica at the beginning.
Oh, you know Johnny. He just gets a little carried away.
Yes, exactly. And ruins everything. That's the problem.
By the way, let me clarify that I really do enjoy Andy Samberg. He could be a great actor like in Palm Springs and Storks, and he could be hilarious with The Lonely Island. However, he can only be as good as the materials he's given, and his performance as Johnny can really be like salt on an open wound.
With this mighty key, I will unlock the future and usher in a new destiny for the great Hotel Transylvania!
Also, I want to ask an honest question. How much better would all these movies be if Johnny never existed? Imagine how much room there is for the franchise to really improve upon its other aspects. It could have more time to explore its concept of monsters and Drac taking care of the hotel. It could give other characters like Mavis more of a personality and have more of a purpose. It could reject the bland love angle in favor of more time to see the father-daughter relationship. Yes, they would be completely different movies without Johnny, but that's my point. Without him, they would be good movies. And if there's one thing I'll be happy to never see again from this, it's his dim-witted and hyperactive nature. And the fact that the fourth movie is asking me to care about this guy as if he's someone to support and root for feels like a complete insult.
You didn't want to have any bonding time with me. You just didn't want to give me the hotel!
No! I mean, yes, but...
You hate me!
And then there's everyone else. who throughout the franchise, their roles are often minimal at best. They either serve as extra comic reliefs provided by one of Sandler's friends, or just some sort of plot device for either exposition or make the situation a bit more challenging. In the fourth film, considering how this got the Ice Age problem of accumulating way too many side characters over the course of the sequels, it's now facing a case of quantity over quality. Some like Mavis, Van Helsing, and Erica are reduced to plot exposition to explain Drac and Johnny's situation, while Frank, Murray, Wayne, and Griffin are just bad one-note gags of how they're handling being human, which I don't think even some of the fans appreciate. Seriously, go ask them how they feel about Griffin's visible form. The reaction certainly gave me more entertainment than the movie itself. The franchise never really had great personalities in the first place. They got some great voice actors, but that's not enough to make anyone either truly memorable or even likable. But in Transformania, it's for the best that not just Drac, but all the characters should retire. Hotel Transylvania Transformania is a presentation of everything that's wrong with the Hotel Transylvania franchise by amplifying all of its problems to deliver a miserably tiring experience. There's barely much of a story, and whatever story there is in this is purely weak. The animation is more exhausting to watch than being enjoyable, the characters range from pointless to annoying, and the comedy could never surpass a few chuckles, and the only real joke of the film is the writing. The only good thing that this feature serves is that this is a confirmation that the franchise is officially over, but had to unfortunately conclude this in the worst way to cap off an animated movie franchise since Ice Age Collision Course. I'll just throw it out now. This is an obvious choice to give this the Animat seal of garbage, where it started at a low bar and it just sank from there. And yet, after that whole experience, it really is for the best that Hotel Transylvania is over after that. And I'm not saying that because I never liked this franchise, but honestly, it's because Sony Animation has become so much better than this. Ever since they released Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, they became a completely different studio where now they are creatively at their prime and have released many of their best works yet that actually value substance as much as the style. They're no longer stuck with regurgitating the same unappealing hyperactive rubber hose animation and forcing themselves to be hip and trendy. Nowadays, they're being experimental. They're telling engaging stories and bringing us to worlds and adventures we want to explore. And you know what? It's actually paying off. When watching Transformania, this doesn't feel like it's from the studio that made either Spider-Verse or Mitchell's or Vivo. This feels more like it's from the studio that made the Emoji Movie. Not to mention that the way they kept making Hotel Transylvania films felt a lot like how Blue Sky was handling Ice Age. The way they keep coming out one after another, not because the people at Sony had great creative ideas for the Drac Pack, but because how the franchise is like the only thing that was keeping Sony Animation financially afloat, while the other movies never had a chance at the box office. And without the dependency on Transylvania's revenue, well, let's just say that when Blue Sky stopped the Ice Age franchise, it did not end well a few years later. And look, I get that the Hotel Transylvania movies are just kids' movies. They're not necessarily made for anyone over the age of 8 to enjoy for themselves, and certainly not for grown adults like me. And you know what? If the kids like it, that's perfectly fine. Regardless of my feelings, I know that these are relatively harmless. And just like other low-tier animated films that are on Hotel Transylvania's level, like The Boss Baby, The Addams Family, and the Ice Age sequels after the first trilogy, they serve their purpose if they can entertain children and keep them distracted for over an hour. But as someone who likes watching movies, I'm just glad to see not just this franchise be over, but for Sony to completely let go of their old ways. Besides, if I want to watch an animated film franchise with family values, I'd rather stick with the Despicable Me movies. Sure, they're not as stylized as Transylvania, but what they lack in style, they more than make up for in actual substance, with great characters, a solid heart that can deliver some touching moments, and enjoyable comedy that can consistently make me laugh. I honestly laugh more at the Minion shenanigans in just one Despicable Me film than the amount of times I did with all the Hotel Transylvania films combined. And with that, it is time that we say goodbye to Hotel Transylvania. We shared a few laughs, but now I'm moving on to watch some actual good movies.
That the hotel is destroyed!